This film wants to show living conditions in Ballymun, but from the point of view of the people who live here and not by the point of view of government bodies, big newspapers or television stations. This is the first time ever a film has been made by the people who live in Ballymun about Ballymun.
There's a story that the architects must have been influenced by Druids because of the circles and the columns and the way they're positioned, north, south, east, west, and it just seems to be always sunny in my memory, but of course it wasn't.
Typical family at home in Ballymun. These young people are inheriting all the amenities of this modern age. They live in a community where the basic facilities for their...
The day after we moved in, a neighbour stood at my door with net curtains for my whole house. And her words were, "You're a young mother, and there you go, welcome to the neighbourhood." And I went, "Oh."
For me, growing up, what I loved most was the green spaces, the flats, the warmth, climbing on the flats, you know, the adventure of Ballymun.
We had a big football pitch at the back of Shanghai Avenue. There would be 100, 200 people there, day in, day out, playing football matches non-stop until it got dark, I suppose.
Barney, what are we doing? Are we doing an interview? Are we doing an interview? We do an interview?
We're doing an interview, yeah.
It was a tough game, it was.
Very tough. Especially when this fella got me sent off.
Yeah, well,
Say here, you want to send yourself over there?
You're bleeding muck.
Spring came summer, now This place was absolutely booming when it closed. I remember the night before this place was closed, we were all up here. I'd say 50 people. Every snooker table was full, every pool table, the whole lot. And we were told, lads, bring these accused with you. This place was meant to be took down, what, 7 years ago, Martin?
Yeah. We thought we would have had our new premises.
7 years. If they gave us them 7 years back.
In fairness, you sort of get a bit demotivated after a while when you're knocking doors, you know, and there's nothing happening.
Our own survey shows that nearly 75% of the people who are living in the community were happy. What also came out, however, was a picture of a massive neglect of the area by state bodies. In the area's only health centre, there are just 4 doctors. There are 2 dentists, 5 social workers and 2 community workers. There is no ambulance service. There is no casualty department.
How long do you normally queue here when you come up?
You have to be here about 12:30 when you're lucky. It doesn't start till 3 and you get in at 2:15.
And you're standing here all that time. What about if it's raining or something like that?
You're still here in the rain.
Still have to stand.
I'm just lucky I had someone to mind the children today. They'd be here screaming with me.
We don't need this. We really don't need this. We need people that are going to say, yeah, Ballymun is a problem, we'll do it. Most of us here are voluntary workers, giving up our hours small. Women, yeah, have children, dropping their kids off. Users still get paid in the day to back to their office. And their cars waiting outside us. Even the TDs sitting here today, I think it's pathetic because they never hear any other time. If they're not here when we really need them. And after what I'm after here now, it's typical. I've done a meeting with the dope. It's 11 o'clock. Hopefully we'll have something successful there. Because after all, it's just talking shit.
Well, I had a choice whether I would come out here or not. I'm a minister for the whole country. But I did want to come here. I would love to stay.
It's always happened that way, that the people had to take charge. You know, who knows best what's needed, say in Ballymun. They can make rules and regulations up there in the Dáil, but the people who live on the ground know what's needed, and it has, in my experience, always been the people had to take charge of what was needed before anybody listened.
The Ballymun swimming pool was built after a campaign where local people blocked bulldozers which were making that particular site into a car park.
Give a proven to the people in Ballymun that if they get together, they work together, they too can achieve a great deal more than government corporations are prepared to give them credit for.
If it's only half a dozen people and they want to do something in Ballymun, for Ballymun, then the Ballymun Echo will be behind them all the way.
Pretty much anything that did exist, that from my recall, were set up by local people.
When I see the empty flats, it reminds me of when they were doing something, they started knocking down Shannock Street. I don't know whether you ever remember Shannock Street.
Just awful.
The houses gradually over the years, the whole street, the long street starts to deteriorate. They start blocking off, moving people. And I'm not saying they're doing that to Ballymun, but I think they have some plans. Because if you go down, especially down the end of Balcurris, that's in an awful state. They're running down the area.
I remember when I was 16, 17, and a group of us teenagers walking through Ballymun, and it was in October evening, it was very, very windy, and they would put these, when anybody vacated a flat, they'd put these metal sheets on the windows. All you could hear was them blowing, and it was the eeriest sound.
But what are buildings without people? The success of Ballymun in the final analysis will be judged by the happiness and well-being of the families living there. In any event, they're away to a good start in their attractive flats and homes.
You don't give a fuck about any of us here. You're getting a check every fucking week.
Please, ladies, that's not necessarily to interview get out of hand.
How would you come on? We use the time, style and antics of Dublin Corporation. We all know it is totally impotent when it comes to solving problems that you yourself cause. You like to sit there and look down on us poor saps whose lives you decide on. It's make me sick. Come on, girls, let's get the fuck out of here.
My name is John Fitzgerald, Dublin City Manager. Dublin Corporation set up Ballymun Regeneration Limited to develop the new town of Ballymun. It has 350 hectares of zoned land for development, which with incentives is one of the most attractive areas in Dublin now for potential investors. The new town is hugely important from our point of view in terms of potential development, but also in terms of the new community which is building up in that area.
Traditionally, Dublin Corporation would have been seen as one of a number of institutions of state who had failed Ballymun and its community. There was perhaps some lack of confidence at department level in the ability of Dublin City Council, the former Dublin Corporation, to plan the future, because the history of the management of the estate wasn't terrific, and therefore it was probably felt that a new broom needed to take on this enormous challenge.
Well, what I don't understand, mister, is you spent 4 million doing it up and you're going to pull it back fucking down. That is a load of codswallop.
The leading authority on this would be perhaps Dr. Anne Power from the London School of Economics, who has spent a lifetime studying the consequences of failed high-rise public housing estates. And in her seminal work, Estates on the Edge, she features Ballymun as one of 5 estates throughout Europe that best demonstrate the excesses of the time and the poor planning of the time, the quick fix solution. What went wrong that created these ultimate ghettos.
You could rescue these estates if you combine social with management, with environmental, and with financial remedies. You had to kind of get everything together in what I called a patchwork solution. I think it was the patchwork solution that Ballymun Regeneration bought into, where Ballymun Regeneration and Dublin Corporation differed from any of the other estates was in the decision to go for wholesale demolition of the whole estate, which wasn't actually a decision that I thought was in the best interest, really, of the country, the estate, the people, or actually the finances of Dublin Corporation.
I think the demolition thing wasn't something that people had really contemplated till quite late. People still felt, you know, refurbish the flats and do it in this way or that way, and there was all sorts of proposals to, you know, sell them off to individual co-ops to manage individual blocks within a co-op and stuff like that. But I think the demolition thing hadn't really been seriously sort of contemplated as something that was going to happen.
This is an opportunity to correct, I think, many things many of us believe have been wrong for a few years. If we can look at this project and get it right, it'll be a model of best practice that we no doubt will use again in other parts of the country. I think in good times for the economy, it's an opportunity for us to see that we can do that, where we can provide first-class facilities, for bring in economic rejuvenation, bring in jobs, bring in investors, have top-quality education, and at the same time, most important of all, to give a high quality of life, and second to nowhere else in this country, to the people of Ballymun. I look forward to that. The projects will take us some time, but as soon as we get up and running, it will come to fruition and it will happen. Thanks a lot, folks.
I think when once they decided to demolish it, it had to be a showcase. It's very close to Dublin Airport, and so it's very, very conspicuous, and what they did in Ballymun would be noticed by international visitors.
Et la question enfin, c'est puisqu'on constate cette communauté très vivante.
You've got a great sense of solidarity between you, and this solidarity is the architectural side of it and the physical side of it, is that you're living collectively in a building. And going from this, wouldn't you think, I mean the question is that, wouldn't you think that this solidarity would be broken up by the fact that you will all be living, you know, eventually in individual houses, in individual private houses?
The foundation for me would be that solidarity with the people, with each other, because of the collective living, is I think it's almost like a food, a sustenance that keeps you surviving in a community.
No, but do you think that this solidarity would be broken?
It will be different. Yes, it will be broken. It will be different.
It will be.
It will be different.
There's a very high risk that when they are starting to build the houses and to demolish the flats, that they will forget to build all the other things.
In the period of the Celtic Tiger, it looked as though nothing would hold back Ireland's economic prosperity. It was a very, very symbolic project, I think.
There was an echo always resounding in my head as I was talking about the plans for the new Ballymun, that, hey, this was done before in the 60s. They were talking about the fantastic new world that the high-rise would be, and yet it went all wrong.
It was the older population in Ballymun who looked at this master plan and said, in 1962, we saw a master plan that looked very similar to this. And it never was built. We don't believe you. That looks lovely, but we don't believe you. The plan was for the regeneration to take 10 years, And people said, that isn't possible. You will never, ever do this in 10 years. And they haven't.
When you get your cup of tea, I'll give you about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Get your cup of tea, sit down. Okay, sorry, the tea is being held up there.
We had to be very optimistic in the time frame that was established, because to keep the community with us, if we were to go out to people who had been campaigning for 30 to 35 years for a redevelopment to happen, and if you had to tell them it was going to take another 10, 15 years, that's an extraordinary long length of time for somebody who is at the end of their tether in campaigning.
Are there any fears attached to it? I mean, are you in any way nervous of losing something that is in place now that might go with the new development?
No, I have no fears. They can only improve Ballymun. If you take on board that this community has survived as long as it's had to survive, and we have never even had the basic of a cinema. That is basic, you know, that was a right for every community that I lived in as a kid. Well, if you look back on that now, we haven't even had that. So if this, I mean, you know, it'd have a nervous breakdown if you were to think that this wasn't for the benefit of this community.
There is a tension for any organisation that's involved in a social agenda but is governed by the Companies Acts to distinguish the two roles. So one is representative, but under the Companies Acts, every director of a company is there to further the benefits of that entity. Legal, that's your duty, is to that organisation, and to progress it in every way possible.
Well, I remember the big roundabout, the sunken roundabout, and it was a shortcut to the airport. And I and many other Dubliners had no reason to come to Ballymun other than as a shortcut. So it wasn't that I had negative perceptions, I just had never had cause to stop. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce in Dublin in 2007. At the end of that term, the city manager asked me would I be interested in taking on the role of chair of the regeneration company in Ballymun. There had been earlier proposals that maybe it would be a change of name might facilitate investment, but we had a board meeting, a board away day indeed, in which we debated what the branding of Ballymun meant, and it was under the title Ballymun and the name of Ballymun. Was it utopian? There was an opportunity, there was a blank canvas to paint on.
I think certainly from what I would feel about urban design and how towns and cities work, it was a place that wasn't really a place. You know the song, the U2 song, which is the place, the streets have no name. That's, well, to me, very significant in terms of how towns and cities operate. It was a very typical example of development all across the world from the 60s. I mean, that this type of development was very prevalent and seemed to be the thing of the future from Corbusier onwards.
In designing the new Ballymun, we wanted to get away from the monotonous, large local authority housing estates or the urban sprawl like you had in the North Clondalkins or West Tallaght that were developed in the 70s and 80s.
What really does change, though, is the total rejection of things like social housing, and particularly council housing, the rejection of planning, both economically and ideologically, and more generally a sort of return to a 19th century idea of capitalism as this sort of force of nature that if you hold back will do bad things.
It remained an area which had, if you like, 5,000 housing units in the end, but not one of them was built by the private sector, which is so totally upside down and topsy-turvy to Ireland in general. It has always been government policy to promote owner-occupation. It's not that you have to own your house to be successful. It's that nobody who doesn't own a house, really, most people who have financial security own houses. So both socially and physically, it was quite out of tune with other places that tend to be more successful.
People who were allocated in flats in Ballymun were the people who were classed as too poor to buy, too vulnerable to buy, too transient to buy, just not able to aspire to that level.
I think the idea was that it would become a 50-50 area, so 50-50, for want of a better expression, working class and 50-50 sort of middle class or sort of split. That's what they were looking for. That's what I heard discussed at a number of different forums.
The idea is that it's a sort of limiting to be in somewhere where everyone in the particular area is like you or in the same social position as you. I guess you could connect it to the weird phrase, which I don't think is used much anymore, which was social exclusion. Like, they didn't talk about poverty, they talked about social exclusion. You had a cycle where you were unemployed, most people knew you were unemployed, you didn't necessarily have hope, or to use the Blairite buzz phrase, aspiration. But the idea is sort of excluded from what, I guess?
I don't think that it was the bad intention that was the problem. The problem was that the sheer size of that organization, not only the administration, the bureaucracy inside, but also on all the building sites, it was a huge presence. I mean, it was almost like a second Ballymun. that was kind of dumped on the Ballymun.
We had a strategy from the outset that we would counter the negative publicity with good news stories about the plans for the redevelopment. And we used the I suppose, the mechanism or the vehicle of the arts to get that image across.
Breaking Ground is a new arts programme in Ballymun. Workshops will commence in January, with bronze casting by Dave Kinane and creative writing by novelist Leah Mills.
This is what's called the Percent for Art scheme, which is interesting to reflect what that means. So what it means is that if you were involved in construction, a percentage of the money was set aside for artistic endeavours, which is very admirable objective to have. But because there was so much building work in Ballymun, the Ballymun Percent for Art scheme would have been the biggest one in the country. Those people who were in the business of artistic endeavour, who wanted to sell their services, this wasn't lost on them.
The work was called A Map to Care. And my first question was in the communication, who cares? And it was, if you care, you pay. There's something. There's a little bit something about it. You put your hand to your pocket. So that is a map, and it would be the map of the new place, and the whole plaza would be showing the names of the participants, of the people. So it would be a legacy to that, put your hand to your pocket, into your pocket. To take a stake in that place. Don't bicker only. And people, of course, they told me, you make the poorest people in Ireland pay. Because I wanted to get out of this loop of the goodness, of the so-called goodness.
You have a decanted building, nobody's in there, and it's been stripped out, and it was turned into a hotel for a month or something. And people from all around, in fact, we had visitors from the OECD who came to look at it. And money was spent to do this thing up. And people stayed there for a little while, and then it was demolished. I didn't get that. I couldn't get that at all.
What do you think it was trying to convey?
Well, I have no idea.
I think the project was, in a sense, it could kind of neutralize the situation in some sense. It's a kind of a neutrality, so whichever position you take, the project would allow that. The project could facilitate your position.
I was a little bit obsessed. I have a Starbucks in Ballymun because I thought that is the best sign that something really is you could call it gentrified, but I mean, young people like it. And to create a place of attraction, like a culture and cafe goes well together. And where, something a little bit like in Vienna,
Really pleased to be here again this morning. And genuinely, when I drove in here this morning, I thought,
It looks fantastic, Ballymun. Like, it looks like driving in somewhere in just another country. It just looks really great. So obviously part of that is the spirit of the people who live out here.
You say that moving house is one of the most stressful things you can do, okay, in your life. You say it's one of the most causes of stress, moving house. Now, if you move a whole community at the one time, then there's huge stress in the whole community. Yes, there were incredibly raw exchanges. People had to vent their frustrations. I often said in the early stages, in the early days, we knew that we had to exercise the pain and hurt of 30 years of perceived neglect and hurt that had to be exercised. You had to be prepared to turn the other cheek, you have to turn the other cheek and to take a lot of abuse before people would begin engaging in a rational way.
There's not one bit of green left. My curtains haven't been pulled for over 18 months. When they took the hoarding down, they fenced us in like animals. They put a cage up against our walls and our gardens. You try and get BRL, they tell you, we have permission. We can do what we like, and that is their attitude.
The theorists in relation to public consultation will say that it should be the community making all the decisions. Now, I think we struck a very good balance.
I think consultation was also a word that was misread by the community. And consultation can sometimes mean we'll consult with you, but we mightn't always listen to you.
What's important is that you, the community, have a process whereby you feel involved to the extent that you have confidence in the partnership approach that is delivering for you what the community needs are. There is far more consultation and real participation here than in any project in the history of the state. But we have to be able to identify within that there is another dynamic often taking place in very sophisticated communities like this, which is there are community activists and individuals who have their own agenda, who don't always have the common good at heart. That's a bit controversial, okay?
A bit is putting the body.
And people actually thought, I think by the word consultation, that their words would be heard and their concern. And of course we all, including myself, might have got things wrong. Everybody does, but there was an awful lot of things that they would have got right.
They had a planning day which was held in the shopping centre in Ballymun, and on display they had some of the suggested models for the regeneration programme, as well as some elements from the master plan. My first thought is, well, this is already planned.
There will be some very localised pressure groups who won't be satisfied with any of the options or solutions that we might bring forward. This has to be viewed in the context of the magnitude of the overall proposal, and that we can't just compromise the plan.
But land, as we speak, I'm sure there's deals and wheels going on at this particular time with companies who are dealing with the BRL to buy up the land that's there in order that they can develop whatever it is.
But it is being factored in, and the board has given a commitment. Like the board could have taken the stance that
just in terms of Ballymun being built 20 odd years ago, and no amenities or facilities were put in for the people, we would hate to think that we're going back down that road again.
I'm not prepared to sit back and allow an economic investment programme to take place in the absence of a social and cultural indigenous project.
I remember the principal housing officer for Dublin Corporation was saying to us, we don't know what to do with the place, tell us what to do with the place. And People responded to that very positively. They didn't say, well, that's negative. They said, right, we'll work with you to plan a new future for Ballymun.
What do we conclude about Ballymun? Firstly, the level of engagement between BRL and Dublin City Council and the community and voluntary sector is best described as tokenism in terms of international criteria. Secondly, BRL's style of engaging with groups has eroded trust, both within the community and voluntary sector and between the community and voluntary sector and the local authority.
The regeneration sort of, inadvertently I suppose is the right word, sort of did cause that sort of breakup of the collective community voice.
I think a lot of the time, things like tenants' associations get split by these sorts of things. They usually get very, very starkly split into people that accept what's happening and people that don't. There's usually a certain amount of like, you know, the money's here and we're going to try and make it work and, you know, maybe it'll be good. But, you know, quite frequently, you know, other people within those groups will notice quite what pup they're being sold and try and fight it.
Okay, so the Community Action Programme in Ballymun is known locally as CAP.
It was the only organisation at the time that was taking very political issues. So, you know, you knew that if something was going on, you were worried about something going on in your area, you knew that if you came to CAP, that you could perhaps be able to get to a point of perhaps campaigning on something. The good thing was the community trusted CAP to do that, to take whatever idea and help them turn it into actions. And that's just the way it was. And I suppose still can't believe I'm using the term the tense was. Because from next Friday, the 30th of April, the organisation will no longer exist. We are being forced, and I mean forced, to wind down the official company. The keys to the office are going to be handed back, the final audit will be complete, and CAP will no longer exist. They came along with an idea for a community, which seemed, you know, fine probably on paper. If you're looking at it, you know, from the outside in, so you don't understand how a community works. And you know, they set up these sort of forums in areas, and in those forums there were people elected and nominated. It was like, you know, mini politics. And we all know if democracy works, it'd be banned, you know. The person that was representing this neighbourhood got one vote.
Forum elections are taking place on the 20th of May this year. Ballymun is changing. If you're interested in managing this change, isn't that the best way? Ballymun is changing. You can make a difference. Your vote counts.
It's now 10 years on, and unfortunately we're only starting to realise, say, in the last 18 months, that they're here with their own agenda and it doesn't meet in with ours. They've never once taken on board anything that we have said in regards putting in local amenities, talking to people properly. They will talk, and then when you're finished talking, whatever you wrote down, they throw it in the dustbin. That's my firm belief.
There were a number of people there from the Adjoining Residents Association who were saying, well, democracy, you know, the rights of the individual to take a court action or to launch a planning appeal, etc., that you couldn't, that's what democracy is all about. I heard nobody actually saying that democracy was about accepting the will of the vast majority of the people.
Yes.
That if 99.9% of the people are supporting.
ground floor flat, and this was the shop van. It was kind of facing this way. One of the things I always done was, if I wasn't ready to go out, I'd shout down to the kids to go over and get stuff for me, or milk or cigarettes in the van, the shop van. And of course, you can't buy cigarettes, children can't buy cigarettes. But I could actually see the woman in the van. I'd signal over that they were for me. She'd go over and she'd get them. The child would go over and get them for me. And then when he came back over to me, he wouldn't come up the stairs, and I just lowered down a bag on a bit of string. And he'd send cigarettes up in that, like, and I'd throw them down a few bottles.
I think nostalgia is a double-edged sword. It's very important for us to know where we came from and to have that sense of belonging and being an inner confidence that I'm such and such and I belong to such a community. I certainly don't deny the community of Ballymun that, but I think you also need to look forward and to embrace change.
Anything that's about working class people's experience in Ireland is going to be controversial unless people are just going sort of, we was poor but we was happy, you know. But yeah, anything that goes beyond Dublin in the rare old times, it's going to be controversial because it's going to upset the people with power and the people with money.
For what it's worth, it is printed, but not yet published.
Oh, right.
It took us 6 years to get it printed because initially the good people in the regeneration, obviously they're used to dealing with outsiders coming in and saying, oh, well, you know, it'll be a community event, blah, 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 and not actually meaning it.
Yeah.
And when they discovered that it actually was being run by local people and not the kind of local people they approved of, the funding for publishing the book mysteriously disappeared.
So basically they ran out of money, that's why they didn't publish the book.
No, they didn't run out of money, they chose not to go ahead with the funding. It was about choosing the story that was published. It was wanting to have editorial control.
But can you not do that to publish them books? Nothing around.
Well,
no, you cannot. Money-wise, you know, if you're brought to court, you know, if that was published in the... Yeah, but in about 20 years' time, then people won't be around. Neither will we.
People do want to be connected to their past, so I understand it totally. I've also met many people who would have said to me, growing up in Dublin, one of the guys who worked with us in Ballymun, he grew up in the tenements, and he said, there's an awful lot of rubbish talked about living in the tenements. It was awful, you know, which is, it's an interesting way of looking at something like that.
walk towards me.
People were very conscious of the media image because it was very easy to depict. If you talk about heroin, just show a picture of the flats at the same time. So people were aware that they were bringing their kids up in an area that looked like, you know, Ballymun equals heroin. There was one guy had his name and address written on his hand when he jumped, you know, and a contact number. Again, it was the flats of suicide, the flats of crime, the flats of drugs.
Shangan Road, we lived there for 24 years, I think. We were south-facing. There was a lot of light in the flat. I used to go by sometimes and look up as well, and I don't think anything happened. I wouldn't have liked anyone to get in and mess in it or...
And people think that I'm on drugs, and I get really embarrassed. And everybody in the community should do more, and leaders should come in and more activity should be put up. If I haven't been playing football or doing all the activities in my community, I think that I will be on drugs myself. And in a couple of years, if I don't play football, I think I'll be on drugs as well.
Heroin is really one of the most dangerous drugs that people are using. And there are a lot of people here presently who are smoking it and think that it won't affect the baby. But unfortunately, it will. If you inject or smoke heroin, it will affect your baby. Now, the short-term effects of heroin would be that it makes people sick.
A camera system has now been installed. This camera system is a new aid for the Ballymun community. The camera system helps make Ballymun a safer community where illegal activity will be dealt with. It allows people to go about their ordinary business with the knowledge that the area is supervised and their safety is heightened.
Through their frustration with the authorities, the people themselves pulled together in their fight against drugs. They set up their own drug watch, policing the entrances of their blocks and preventing the dealing and the drug using. Although this was very successful, it must be said that the drug watch was inspired only by the lack of response by the authorities, the Gardaí, the corporation and the government itself.
Our attitude is if they can police their blocks to a point of where they can get rid of drugs, then we see their future as excellent, and it ties in nicely, it gels very nicely with the plan for the redevelopment of Ballymun.
I love this house, you know, it definitely is. It's my dream house, you know. It's everything that I've dreamed of. They seemed very happy for me to move in here, you know. They were very nice. On the day I signed for the house, you know, they were wishing me well in my new house, you know. No, I'm not saying that right. Actually, that's not really what happened. I'm from Ballymun for 45 years, you know. To me, it's an absolute honour. And I'm very proud to be the very last person to be housed out of the flats in Ballymun. I love my flat. No, it's where I raised my two daughters. You know, good times in this flat, and I'm heartbroken that I have to leave it. You know, but I know I have to go. But I'm not going just to anything. We went to meetings and we were promised a house. We were promised a garden. And when I got my letter in the door of the property that I was going to, it was an apartment. I've lived in flats all my life. You know, for my grandchildren, I wanted a garden. Dear Miss Matthews, I am instructed to write to you in relation to the proposed relocation of you and your household to a new accommodation. This arises from the intended demolition of Joseph Plunkett Tower, the last remaining tower of Ballymun, the next phase of the Ballymun regeneration programme. You are the remaining occupant of Joseph Plunkett Tower, and the situation you are in is unsustainable. Thanks to Dublin City Council for that. If you do not accept this accommodation, Dublin City Council will have no option but to take legal proceedings for the vacant possession of 13 Joseph Plunkett Tower, which may involve considerable legal and other costs. It will be necessary in the public interest to seek to recover any such costs from you. And I know if I go down the road to court with Dublin City Council, I will lose. Dublin City Council are very powerful, and I will lose. They will be awarded the injunction to have me removed from Joseph Plunkett Tower on this letter, because because the tower block is an unsafe environment, which Dublin City Council have made it unsafe for me by taking out the concierge, by not maintaining the upkeep of the building. I can't believe that Dublin City Council are putting me through this. I really, really can't. I'm absolutely devastated.
In order for positive change to become permanent, it is critical, therefore, that the residents of Ballymun offer their support and encouragement to the representatives and agencies within the area so as to avoid their burnout and exhaustion. That their welfare is your welfare. This means removing the them and us scenario and working in joint partnership. After all, stressed out people make bad decisions. So some of the glossy stuff that you hear from NLP, basically you'll find that we can literally sort out a phobia in 15 minutes. So a person that can have a problem for their entire life, 15 minutes we've got rid of it, because we know how the brain functions, how it operates. And once you learn how that operates, then you can actually begin to install change and create change. In the first instance, I was brought in when the Dublin City Council were converting kind of their process from rent collectors, really bad negative sort of perception, to estate managers or community, I can't remember what was the term, community officers, okay? So I was brought in to teach them practical skills, interpersonal skills, to be able to work with the community without alienating the community, to be able to bring them on board, to be able to deal with their needs, with their issues, basically to be able to engage in a way where they can actually understand and read resistance or cooperation or acceptance signals or rejection signals, being able to profile people, being able to understand, so you can actually be able to influence people in a really effective way, in a very positive way, in a way that actually be sustainable. So when I done that, when they recognised basically that stuff was working, they said, okay, well, really the best way forward with this stuff is bring that out to the wider community.
have a fine building. You can have a fine building, but it's no good unless all of us together work, make it a real community. You can have the nicest house in the world, the best house, but unless there's a community in it, it's no good. The real foundations of any place, whether it's
When the lift door opens, as you can see, water is dripping. Water is dripping. That's what you're faced with when you come out of the lift. Water everywhere. It's the hallway to the entrance door. It's all full of water. Friday that Bernie was moving out, I only lived 2 floors down, so it was quicker for me to run up the stairs to Bernie to help her move than it would have been to get the lift. And they were using the lift to take Bernie's furniture down. And there was a chap here, and he was brought in to weld up that door for when Bernie moved out, so now youths could get in to the unoccupied flats. And as I came up the stairs, the chap was cutting through the banisters. And at first I thought nothing of it. When I came up the stairs, he sort of jumped back. He got a fright. And I asked who he was, and he said he was here to weld up the door for when Bernie moved. And I thought nothing of it. On the Sunday night, when I got flooded, Monday morning I had to ring Dublin Fire Brigade to get into me flat. And the fire marshal came up to see where the water was coming from. And when he came down to me, he said they gained access through the banisters. And that's when it clicked with me. I had Coral cutting the banisters.
Perfect. Now warm. That's it.
these are supposed to be basic rights, yet when people demand these rights, they are treated as privileges. Experience from other areas has shown that these demands can only be met through people organising and talking. People need to be aware of the conditions affecting their everyday lives so that we can begin to have some influence over them. We hope that this video will prompt some discussion on these issues in Ballymun and in other working class areas.